What would you do if, 2 hours after burying your son, his teacher called and told you not to tell anyone because you were in danger? How could a quiet hydrologist end up freezing at the doorway of an office where someone he thought was gone forever was standing? This is the story of how that moment became the final trigger for the reckoning I had been preparing since childhood, the moment I stopped being afraid of my mother. Before we continue, we ask you to hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We would like to get to know our audience better. The cemetery grass was too green for November. I stood at the edge of the grave, watching them lower the small casket into the ground, and all I could think was how the grass shouldn't be that green. Someone had watered it recently. Someone had made sure everything looked perfect for this moment. My mother stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder like a claim of ownership. She wore black, of course, but it was the kind of black that costs money. Designer fabric that absorbed light differently than my off-the-rack suit. She'd arranged everything. The flowers, the service, the words the minister spoke. I hadn't been asked about any of it. "You're being very strong, Aron," she whispered, loud enough for the relatives behind us to hear. "I'm proud of you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat had tightened hours ago, somewhere between the service location and this patch of too green grass. My son was 7 years old. Was, in the past. I kept forgetting to speak about him in the past tense. Across the grave, I saw Ms. Rourke, his homeroom teacher. She wasn't crying like the other teachers who'd come. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. When our eyes met, she looked away quickly, then back again, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. My mother's grip on my shoulder tightened. "People are looking at you," she murmured. "Stand up straighter." I was 28 years old, and my mother was still telling me how to stand. The service ended. People filed past, offering condolences that sounded like scripts. My mother accepted them gracefully, speaking for both of us. "Thank you so much. Yes, it's devastating. Aron is handling it as well as can be expected. We're all just trying to support each other through this impossible time." I noticed she used "we" a lot, as if this was happening to her. Ms. Rourke approached last. She shook my mother's hand first. Protocol, I suppose. Then turned to me. Up close, I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes kept darting to my mother and back. "Mr. Hale," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry for your loss. If you need anything—" "Thank you," my mother answered for me. "We appreciate all the school's support during this difficult time." Ms. Rourke's lips pressed together briefly. She handed me a card, the kind teachers give out with their contact information. "If you need to talk," she said, meeting my eyes with unusual intensity, "about anything, please call me." My mother took the card from my hand before I could respond. "That's very kind of you, Ms. Rourke. We'll be sure to reach out if we need school records or anything like that." Ms. Rourke's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. She nodded once and walked away, but I saw her pause by her car in the parking lot, watching us. The crowd thinned. My mother was speaking with the minister, probably thanking him for reading from the script she'd provided. I stood alone by the grave, staring at the casket, trying to remember the last conversation I'd had with my son. Really had with him, not just morning routine talk about breakfast and homework. I couldn't remember. The realization hit me like cold water. "Aron." My mother's voice cut through the fog. "It's time to go. People are waiting at the house." I didn't know there would be people at the house. Of course there are people at the house. That's what happens after memorials. She said it like I was choosing to be difficult. "I arranged everything. You don't need to concern yourself with anything." I looked at her then, really looked at her. Marlene Hale, mid-50s, immaculate as always. Not a hair out of place, makeup perfect despite the November wind. She looked like she was attending a board meeting, not her grandson's service. "I should have been asked," I said quietly. "Asked about what?" "Everything. The service, the flowers, the minister's words. He was my son." Her expression shifted, just slightly, but I'd known her long enough to recognize it. Disappointment mixed with that particular brand of patience she reserved for when I was being unreasonable. "You weren't in any state to make decisions," she said. "Someone had to handle things. I was doing you a favor." The word favor sat wrong in my mouth, but I didn't have the energy to argue. I never did, not with her. We drove back to my apartment. She insisted on driving, of course, and I stared out the window at the passing streets. Everything looked normal. People walking dogs, getting coffee, living their regular Tuesday afternoon lives. My son was in the ground, and the world just kept turning. My mother talked the entire drive, about the service, about how well it went, about who attended and who didn't. I wasn't listening. I was thinking about Ms. Rourke's expression, the way she'd looked at me like she was trying to communicate something she couldn't say out loud. Back at my apartment, my mother surveyed the small living room with barely concealed disapproval. You should have let me host at my house. More space, better kitchen, but you insisted. I hadn't insisted on anything. I'd mentioned once, days ago, that I'd rather not have a gathering at all. She'd interpreted that as wanting it at my place instead of hers. I'll start setting up, she said, moving toward the kitchen. People should be arriving in about 30 minutes. Try to pull yourself together before then. Pull yourself together, as if grief was something you could tidy up like a messy room. I went to my bedroom and closed the door. On the dresser was the last photo I had of him, taken 3 weeks ago at the park, his gap-toothed smile bright under the autumn sun. He'd lost his first tooth the week before and was impossibly proud of it. My phone vibrated. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. Unknown number. The text was short. This is Ms. Rourke. I need to speak with you privately. It's important. Please don't tell anyone I contacted you. You might be in danger. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. Danger? What danger? My son had passed in an accident at school. Tragic, horrible, but an accident. The police had said so. The school had said so. Everyone had said so. I started to type a response, but another text came through before I could finish. I know how this sounds. I know you're grieving, but there are things about that day that don't match up. Things I noticed. Please call me when you're alone. My hands were shaking. This couldn't be real. Teachers didn't send cryptic warnings to grieving parents. This had to be some kind of stress-induced hallucination, my mind trying to create meaning where there was only senseless loss. But it wasn't a hallucination. The texts were real, the number was real, and somewhere in the back of my analytical mind, the part of me that spent my days measuring water flows and checking system pressures, something clicked into alignment. I thought about the timeline they'd given me, the official timeline. My son had fallen on the playground at 2:15 p.m. The school had called emergency services at 2:18 p.m. They'd called me at 2:45 p.m. after he was already gone. 27 minutes. I'd questioned it once, asked why it took so long to notify me. The principal, Dean Keller, had explained that they were dealing with the emergency first. That parent notification came after securing the situation. It had sounded reasonable at the time, but Ms. Rourke's text made it sound like maybe it wasn't reasonable at all. From the living room, I heard my mother's voice greeting someone. The gathering was starting. I should go out there, play the grieving father, accept more scripted condolences. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, while my entire understanding of the past 2 weeks began to crack at the edges. The phone vibrated again. Not a text this time, a call. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. Hello? Mr. Hale. Ms. Rourke's voice was tight, controlled. Thank you for answering. I know this is the worst possible timing, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. The hydrology field station was quiet when I arrived Wednesday morning, the way it always was before the others showed up. I liked the silence, the way sound traveled differently across water compared to land. My work involved measuring flow rates, analyzing sediment patterns, predicting flood risks. It was all numbers and evidence, concrete, reliable. Unlike everything else in my life right now. I hadn't slept. After Ms. Rourke's call, brief, cryptic, ending with not over the phone, I'd spent hours staring at the ceiling while my mother held court in my living room. She'd finally left around 11, taking the leftover food with her, reminding me to call if I needed anything. I hadn't called. Instead, I'd pulled out every document related to my son's case. Hospital records, police report, school incident documentation. I'd spread them across my kitchen table and started reading with the same methodical attention I used for work analyses. That's when I noticed it. The hospital notification form listed the time I was contacted as 2:47 p.m. The school's incident report said 2:45 p.m. The police report split the difference at 2:46 p.m. Minor discrepancies, probably. Different clocks, different people recording different moments. Except I was a hydrologist. I spent my professional life identifying minor discrepancies because minor discrepancies in water systems could mean structural failures. A 2-minute variance in recorded times might mean nothing, or it might mean someone was lying. You're here early. I looked up from the computer where I'd been pretending to review flow data. Lyle Mann stood in the doorway, coffee in hand, expression concerned. We'd worked together for 3 years. He was a decent guy, competent at his job, prone to making awkward attempts at humor during long field days. Couldn't sleep, I said. Yeah, man, I can't even imagine. He moved closer, hesitant. Listen, everyone here understands if you need more time. We can cover your projects for however long you need. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. He set his coffee down, leaning against the desk. What happened to your son? Nobody expects you to just show up and work like nothing happened. I said I'm fine. The sharpness in my voice surprised both of us. Lyle raised his hand slightly, backing off. Okay, we're here if you need anything. He left. I went back to staring at my screen, not really seeing it. What I saw instead was my mother's face last night, the way she'd moved through my apartment like she owned it, the way she'd answered questions directed at me, spoken for me, made decisions for me, the way she'd been doing my entire life. My phone buzzed. Text from my brother, Nolan. Mom said you're not doing well. Want to meet for coffee? I almost declined, but something about the phrasing stopped me. Not, are you okay? Or, how are you holding up? Just, Mom said, like she was the source of information about my own emotional state. The City Cafe. Noon, I typed back. The morning dragged. I attempted to look at survey reports from the previous week, but couldn't focus. My colleagues moved around me carefully, speaking in soft voices when they had to interact with me, like I was made of something fragile that might shatter with normal volume. By 11:30, I'd had enough. I grabbed my coat and headed out, telling no one where I was going. The cafe was downtown, neutral territory. Nolan was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back corner booth. He looked tired. We both probably looked tired. Hey, he said as I slid into the seat across from him. Hey. We ordered coffee. Neither of us spoke until after it arrived and the waitress had moved away. Mom's worried about you, Nolan said finally. Mom's always worried about something. Aron, come on. Your son just passed. She's trying to help. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. Did she send you here? What? No, I wanted to check on you. But she told you to. Nolan's silence was answer enough. I took a sip of coffee, buying time to organize my thoughts. Nolan was 2 years younger than me, but he'd always been better at navigating our mother's expectations. He'd chosen a career in finance that she approved of, married someone she liked, lived close enough to visit regularly but far enough to maintain boundaries. He'd figured out the dance I'd never managed. Do you remember when I was 16 and wanted to go to that summer science program? I asked. He frowned. Vaguely. Why? Mom said it was a waste of time. Said I should get a real job instead, save money for college. I ended up working at the grocery store that summer. Okay. I got accepted to that program, Nolan. Full scholarship. I never even told her I applied. She found the acceptance letter and threw it away. I only found out because the program director called the house wondering why I hadn't confirmed. Nolan's expression shifted. Not quite surprise, more like uncomfortable recognition. I didn't know that. You were 14. Why would you know? I paused. The point is, she's been making decisions for me my entire life. Decisions she has no right to make. And I've let her because it was easier than fighting. What does this have to do with... She planned my son's funeral without asking me. She chose the casket, the service, the words. She made me a spectator at my own child's burial. Nolan looked down at his coffee. She was trying to help. You were in shock. Was I? Or was that just convenient for her? You're grieving. You're angry. That's normal. But taking it out on Mom isn't... His teacher called me, I interrupted. Yesterday, after the funeral, said something didn't match up about the incident, said I might be in danger. That got his attention. What? Danger from what? She wouldn't explain over the phone, but she seemed scared, Nolan. Actually scared. My brother's jaw tightened. Did you tell Mom about this? No. You should. If there's some kind of safety concern. The teacher specifically said not to tell anyone. All the more reason to tell Mom. Aron, you're not thinking clearly. Someone is feeding you paranoid theories while you're vulnerable, and you need family support right now. Not... Stop. I set my mug down harder than intended. Stop telling me what I need. Stop speaking for Mom. Just... stop. We sat in tense silence. Around us, the cafe continued its normal rhythm. Orders being called out, quiet conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Nolan spoke, quieter this time. What did Mom do? When she found the letter, I mean. After the program director called. I'd almost forgotten we were talking about that. She told them there was a family emergency and I couldn't attend. Then she told me I was being selfish for applying without discussing it with her first. that I didn't understand responsibility. That's her word, responsibility. Yeah, she uses it a lot. He wasn't looking at me anymore. Whenever she wants to shut down an argument. I know. She used it with me when I wanted to propose to Kelly. Said I wasn't being responsible, that I was too young, that Kelly wasn't the right type of person for our family. He laughed bitterly. I almost believed her, almost broke up with Kelly because of it. But you didn't. No, I didn't. He met my eyes. I'm sorry she planned the funeral without you. That wasn't right. Thank you. But I still think you should be careful about this teacher thing. It sounds strange, Aron. Really strange. I know it does. And Mom, look, she has her issues, but she loved your son. She's grieving too, going behind her back, investigating things. It's only going to cause more pain. I wanted to argue, but part of me wondered if he was right. Maybe I was manufacturing conspiracy because I couldn't accept that sometimes terrible things just happened for no reason. Maybe grief was making me paranoid. But then I remembered those time discrepancies. Those small, probably meaningless differences in documentation, probably meaningless. I paid for both coffees and left. Nolan called after me, but I didn't turn around. Back at my apartment, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No return address, no postage, just my name written in neat handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printed notice from the elementary school dated 2 weeks before the incident. It was a routine safety protocol update, the kind of thing schools sent home monthly, but someone had circled one paragraph in red pen. In the event of a student emergency, parents, JOTS, or guardians will be notified immediately via the contact numbers on file. Primary contacts will always be called first, followed by secondary contacts if primary cannot be reached within 5 minutes. Underneath the circled paragraph, in that same neat handwriting, was a single question. Why did it take 27 minutes to call you when you were listed as primary contact? I read it 3 times. 27 minutes. I'd thought about that number before, but I'd accepted the explanation they'd given me. Emergency first, notification after. It had sounded reasonable, but 5 minutes was the protocol. 5 minutes, not 27. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to Ms. Rourke's number. Before I could second-guess myself, I typed, "I need to know what you know." Her response came within seconds. "Not by text. Can you meet me Thursday evening? 7 p.m., school parking lot. Come alone." I stared at the message. This was getting more suspicious, more dramatic. Normal people didn't arrange secret meetings in parking lots. Normal people called the police if they had evidence of wrongdoing, unless the police already knew, unless the wrongdoing was bigger than one teacher could handle alone, or unless I was spiraling into paranoid fantasy while a well-meaning teacher tried to process her own grief about losing a student. I looked at the circled paragraph again, at that question written in careful red ink. 27 minutes. "I'll be there," I typed back. Thursday morning, I drove to my mother's house unannounced. She answered in business attire, clearly preparing to leave. "Aron, this is unexpected. I need to ask you something. I have a meeting in 40 minutes. This won't take long." Inside, everything remained pristine, that same lavender scent from my childhood. "The day of the incident," I said. "When did the school call you?" "After they called you. I wasn't primary contact." "What time exactly?" "Why does this matter?" "What time, Mom?" She moved toward the kitchen, starting her espresso machine. "I don't remember exactly. Afternoon, they told me there'd been an accident and you'd been notified. You got to the hospital before I did. We arrived at the same time." "No. You were already talking to the doctor when I came through the doors." The machine hissed. "You're misremembering," she said. "Grief scrambles your mind." I pulled out my phone, showed her the timeline discrepancies. School protocol says 5 minutes to notify primary contact. It took 27 minutes. You're not primary, but you arrived first. How? Something cold flickered across her face. You've been talking to that teacher. What teacher? Ms. Rourke. She's filling your head with nonsense. How do you know? She's unstable. The school has documented concerns. She's fixating unhealthily, dragging you into her delusions. She hasn't told me anything yet. My mother set down her cup. So you are planning to meet her, despite knowing she's unwell and you're vulnerable. How do you know about her concerns? Principal Keller mentioned it. We've spoken several times. He's worried about both of you. You've been talking to the principal about me? Someone has to look out for you when you're not thinking clearly. The casual presumption, the assumption I couldn't manage my own life, hit hard. I'm leaving, I said. If you meet with that teacher, you're making a mistake. She'll tell you lies, conspiracy theories, and you'll believe her because you want someone to blame. Maybe I just want the truth. The truth is your son fell and hit his head. That's tragic, but it's the truth. Everything else is grief and paranoia. I left without responding. That evening, I arrived at the school parking lot early. At 7 p.m., Ms. Rourke's sedan pulled in. She gestured for me to join her. Inside, she looked exhausted. "Thank you for coming," she said. "My mother knows you contacted me." Her eyes widened. "How?" The principal told her. "She says you're mentally unstable." Ms. Rourke laughed bitterly. "Of course. That's their strategy." She pulled out a folder. "These are copies. Originals are somewhere safe. You're talking like you're in danger." "Maybe I am, or maybe I'm a teacher who noticed inconsistencies." She opened the folder. "The day your son passed, I was on playground duty. I saw him fall. I was first to reach him. The nurse radioed the office at 2:16 p.m. I checked my watch. Official report says 2:15. The fall was 2:15. The office call was 2:16. Exact times matter." She showed me a printed document. Phone system log. Emergency services was called at 2:19 p.m. But look here, outgoing call at 2:17 p.m. to your mother's cell phone. I stared at the number. Why would they call her before emergency services? And why before you? Your primary contact. She produced another document. Custody arrangement on file. Your primary guardian with sole authority. Your mother is secondary emergency contact only. That's correct. Then why was she called first? Why 27 minutes to reach you? That afternoon, I saw your mother in the hallway with Principal Keller. I heard her say, "Just like we discussed." What had they discussed? You could have misheard. Maybe. Or maybe your mother has more involvement than you realize. I returned to my car and analyzed like I would a water system problem. Facts. Protocol. 5 minutes to primary contact. Actual. 27 minutes. Phone log. Mother called at 2:17 p.m. before emergency services. Mother arrived at hospital first. Teacher being labeled unstable, I needed more evidence. The city kept duplicate emergency response records. I drove to the administrative building. The clerk was young, unfamiliar. After getting stonewalled on expedited access, I left and went to the library. The librarian handed me a binder of school safety protocols. The February protocol was standard, but the May version had an addition. In cases where parental custody is disputed or under review, secondary contacts may be notified concurrently with primary contacts at administration discretion. Parental custody under review. My custody had never been under review. I had sole guardianship, unless someone had filed a challenge. I searched online for family court records. Nothing under my name or my mother's. But preliminary custody evaluations could be filed confidentially. All those comments over the years. You work too much. Not strict enough. He needs more structure. Building a narrative slowly. I drove to the police precinct. I need to speak with someone about an incident report. My son's accident 2 weeks ago. Questions about the timeline. The desk officer looked sympathetic but wary. Concerns about school handling should go to the school board? The police responded, "You have records." After some back and forth, he checked his computer, then frowned. "The file has been flagged for administrative review." What does that mean? Someone higher up is examining it. Who flagged it? That's internal. When? He hesitated. 3 days ago. 3 days ago, right after Ms. Rourke started asking questions. At home, I knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. "Did anyone visit my apartment this week while I wasn't home?" Her expression became uncertain. "Well, your mother came by several times. She said she was checking on things. I assumed you knew." What was she doing? She had a key. She'd go in for a while, then leave. Inside my apartment, I checked my filing cabinet. Papers were in different order. Someone had gone through them, probably photographing everything. I constructed a timeline. 2:15 p.m., Sun Falls, 2:16 p.m., teacher radio's office, 2:17 p.m., school calls mother, 2:19 p.m., school calls emergency services, 2:45 p.m., school calls me, 2:48 p.m., mother at hospital, 2:52 p.m. I arrive. If mother was called at 2:17 and arrived by 2:48, that's 31 minutes. My apartment to hospital, 22 minutes. Mother's house to hospital, 35 minutes. Unless she wasn't at her house. My phone buzzed. Email. Your request for duplicate records has been received. I hadn't submitted the form. Someone had filed a request using my name, another text from unknown number. Stop digging. You're only hurting yourself. I took a screenshot. Someone was watching. Someone wanted me to stop, which meant the questions were worth asking. Friday morning, I called in sick. First time in 3 years. Around noon, Nolan called. Mom says you broke into her house and made accusations. I didn't break in. She let me in. I asked questions. She's worried you're having a breakdown. Of course she is. Then why did the school call Mom 27 minutes before calling me? Silence. Administrative error, probably. That's what everyone says, but it all points one direction. Toward what? Toward Mom having more control than I realized, including over my son's life. Even if true, what will you do? Sue Mom? Accuse her of what? I don't know yet, but I'm not stopping. This will destroy the family. I hung up. At 2 p.m., I drove to the elementary school to walk the timeline. I parked where my mother would have parked after the 2:17 p.m. call. From parking to main entrance, 30 seconds. To nurse's office, another minute. But the hospital was 22 minutes away. She couldn't have gotten the call at 2:17 and been at hospital by 2:48. Her downtown office to school, 38 minutes in weekday traffic. She'd said she was at the office when called, but if she was there at 2:17, she couldn't have reached hospital by 2:48. Not possible. She was lying about her location. I drove to her office building. The parking garage attendant looked familiar. I need to check if a vehicle was here on a specific date. 2 weeks ago, Thursday afternoon. Submit formal request through building management. My mother works here. Aron Hale, 8th floor. Recognition crossed his face. Oh yeah, I know her. Real particular about her spot. Was she here 2 weeks ago? Thursday, around 2 p.m.? He frowned. Actually, I remember that day because of a fender bender on level 3 around 2:30. I checked if regular parkers had left early. Her spot was empty by 2:15. Empty by 2:15? Yeah, she usually leaves after 5. She'd left before my son even fell. Are you sure? Positive. The fender bender was at 2:32. Camera timestamps showed her car pulled out at 2:14 p.m. My mother had left her office at 2:14 p.m. My son fell at 2:15 p.m. She'd already been driving toward the school when it happened. How? Unless she knew something was going to happen. My phone rang. Ms. Rourke. They're putting me on administrative leave starting Monday. Vague accusations about boundary issues. This is retaliation. What else did you find? Meet me tonight. Same place, 8 p.m. Something that connects directly to your mother. I need to show you in person. She hung up. I drove to the city clerk's office trying to find location data. No luck. Privacy laws and union regulations blocked everything. Traffic cameras. The city maintained footage for 30 days. At the traffic management center, another complete roadblock. Everything required official authorization. My phone buzzed. Email from unknown address. Check your son's school enrollment forms from 3 months ago. Specifically, who authorized the updates. No signature. At home, I accessed the school parent portal. The forms from 3 months ago showed primary guardian authority, under administrative review per request 2024 as UK47. Request number. There was a filing. I called Ms. Rourke. Do you have access to school board request logs? Request number 2024 is R0847. Typing sounds. It was filed by Aron Hale, your mother, June 15th. Grandparent protective custody evaluation request. Concerns about primary guardian's fitness. She filed a custody challenge? Preliminary evaluation request. That's why the May policy update about concurrent notification, they added it for cases like this. They changed policy because of her request, or she convinced them to change it, then filed. Either way, she had them alter procedures 3 months before your son's accident. 3 months of planning. What are you thinking? Ms. Rourke asked. I'm meeting you tonight, 8 p.m. She'd been driving toward the school before it happened. She'd influenced policy changes. She'd positioned herself for notification. And then my son had an accident. I spent the afternoon preparing, backed up documents to 3 locations, wrote detailed timeline with sources. If something happened to me, this information needed to survive. At 7:30, I left for the school. The parking lot was dark. Ms. Rourke's car was already there. I pulled up beside it. But as I reached for her door, I saw something that made me freeze. My mother's car was parked 3 spaces away. I stood in the dark parking lot staring at my mother's sedan. Empty, but definitely hers. She was here, at the school, when I was supposed to meet Ms. Rourke. I looked at Ms. Rourke's car. Through the window, her silhouette was motionless. Something was wrong. I approached slowly, knocked. No response. I tried the door, unlocked. Ms. Rourke turned to look at me, face pale with fear. In the passenger seat sat my mother, composed and calm. "Hello, Aron," my mother said. Time we all had a conversation. "Get out of the car," I told her. "No, get in the back, unless you want Ms. Rourke to lose more than her job." Ms. Rourke's hands were clenched on the wheel. She gave a tiny headshake. A warning. I got in the back seat. "Good," my mother said. "See? You can still follow directions. Ms. Rourke has been very helpful explaining what she's gathered. Haven't you?" The teacher's voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale. She was waiting when I got here. She said she'd make sure I never taught again." "Not an idle threat," my mother added. "I have friends on the state education board." "What do you want?" I asked. "Stop this nonsense. Stop investigating. Stop questioning. Stop making accusations. Accept what happened and move on. You filed a custody challenge 3 months before he passed. I filed a concern report because you weren't properly caring for him. I was trying to help. You changed school policies to make sure you'd be notified first. I suggested reasonable updates. The board agreed. You left your office 1 minute before he fell. How did you know to leave?" Her composure cracked slightly. "I didn't know anything. I had an appointment." "What appointment?" "None of your business." The parking attendant confirmed you left at 2:14 p.m., 1 minute before the accident. Coincidence. The world doesn't revolve around your paranoid theories. Then explain the phone call at 2:17, before emergency services. Because they knew you'd be unreliable in a crisis. They called someone who could handle the situation. "That's not protocol. That's not legal. It's done." Her voice sharp now. "It's finished. Your son is gone, and nothing you discover will change that. So what's the point?" "The truth? The truth is you were never fit to be a parent. I tried to tell you, but you wouldn't listen. And look where that got you." The words hung in the confined space. "You wanted him gone," I said quietly. "I wanted you to admit you needed guidance, to come back into the family properly instead of pretending you could manage alone. So you arranged an accident. I arranged nothing, but when opportunities present themselves, wise people take advantage." Ms. Rourke made a small sound. My mother ignored her. "Here's what happens next. Hey, you stop investigating. You tell Ms. Rourke you were wrong, that grief made you paranoid. She returns all documents, signs a non-disclosure agreement, accepts her leave quietly. And you move back home with me until you've recovered. No? Yes. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows about your breakdown. Your employer, colleagues, friends. I'll file for emergency psychiatric evaluation. I'll demonstrate a pattern of instability. And when you're committed, I'll ensure all evidence disappears. You can't do that. I absolutely can. I've been documenting your concerning behavior for weeks. The obsessive investigation, paranoid accusations, harassment of school staff. I have witnesses, documentation, everything needed. There's a third option, I said. I'm listening. I have copies of everything, stored in multiple locations. If anything happens to me, those documents get sent to state police, education board, media, everyone. You're bluffing. Test me. We stared at each other. You always were stubborn, she said finally. Just like your father. Look where that got him. Where did it get him? She smiled coldly. Divorced, alone, estranged. That's the price of defying me. Everyone learns eventually. Not everyone. We'll see. She opened her door. Ms. Rourke, 48 hours to return documents and sign the NDA. Aron, same time frame to decide. Handle this quietly or make it public and messy. But remember, if this becomes public, everyone will know your son passed while you were at work, unreachable, too busy. How will that look? She got out and drove away. Ms. Rourke was shaking. I'm so sorry. She was waiting when I arrived. She knew about the meeting. It's not your fault. What will you do? I'm not stopping. She'll destroy you. Maybe, but I'm going to try anyway. I drove home and called Nolan. I need you to listen without interrupting. I told him everything. The timeline, phone logs, custody challenge, policy changes, parking garage records, the meeting tonight, what she'd admitted. Long silence. Then, I believe you. Why? Because she did something similar to Kelly. When I was going to propose, Mom filed a background investigation. Presented me with a fake report claiming Kelly had a sealed juvenile record, financial problems, instability. None of it was true, but it was documented professionally. When I confronted her, she said she was protecting me from making a mistake. You never told me. I was ashamed. I convinced myself it was a one-time thing. But it wasn't. No, I can see the pattern now. What do I do? You can't fight her alone, but you might not have to fight at all. Documentation, evidence, witnesses. If you can build a legally sound case, you don't need to destroy her. You just need to protect yourself. How? Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. I know someone who specializes in family law and custody battles. She's helped clients document abuse and control patterns. Okay. Aron, I'm on your side now. I should have been all along. After hanging up, my phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. The USB drive I mentioned. It's in your son's school locker. Combination is his birthday backwards. Everything you need is there. Another text. Her mistake was thinking she was the only one planning ahead. Then, do not respond. Do not try to contact me. Use what I've given you. The number disconnected. Someone was helping me. Someone who'd been documenting her actions, who'd anticipated I'd start asking questions. I set an alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow would be complicated, but for the first time since the funeral, I felt ready. Saturday morning, 6 a.m., I entered the school through a faulty entrance and found my son's locker. His birthday backwards opened it. Inside, a USB drive taped to the back wall. At home, I plugged it in. One folder, read this first. A video file. My father's face appeared. Aron, if you're watching this, you finally started asking the right questions. I've been waiting years for this. He gathered himself. Your mother didn't just control you and your brother. She controlled me for 23 years. The divorce, she made me pay. Custody battles, financial manipulation, legal harassment. He leaned closer. 3 years ago, when you told me you'd be a father, I started documenting everything. I knew she'd eventually move to control your son. I knew she'd see him as leverage. So I watched. Took notes, saved emails, recorded calls when legal, gathered evidence. Cut to my father at a desk, papers spread around him. I hired a private investigator. 6 months ago, he noticed she'd been meeting regularly with Principal Keller. Private meetings, not at school, unusual. Another cut. 4 months ago, she filed that custody evaluation request. I got a copy through a school board contact. That's when I knew she was building towards something. His expression darkened. 3 months ago, she started asking detailed questions about playground equipment safety at a PTA meeting, specifically about fall surfaces, impact zones, supervision protocols, oddly specific for someone whose grandchild was healthy. My stomach tightened. 2 months ago, she made an anonymous donation specifically for playground maintenance. The investigator tracked it. Routed through shell accounts, ended up in the maintenance budget. Pause. 1 week before your son's accident, she had a private meeting with the playground maintenance supervisor. The investigator couldn't get audio, but saw her showing diagrams and pointing to specific equipment areas. He stopped, composing himself. I don't know if she planned the accident directly or just created conditions where one was more likely. Either way, she prepared. She knew something would happen, and she made sure she'd be in control. Document scans appeared, meeting logs, financial transfers, email chains. I've gathered everything, times, dates, communications, financial records, but I couldn't come forward myself, bitter ex-husband with an agenda. You're the only one who can use this. His face returned. I know you're wondering why I didn't warn you. I tried. 6 times over 3 years. Your mother intercepted every attempt. She has access to your email, phone records, probably your apartment. She's been monitoring you for years. That explained everything. By the time I realized you'd never receive my warnings, I pivoted. When something finally made you question her, you'd find your way here. He leaned back. The other files contained complete documentation. Enough to prove a pattern, enough to demonstrate premeditation, enough to protect yourself and ensure she can't do this to anyone else. The video ended with contact information and, I believe in you, son. Finish what I started. I opened the other files. Hundreds of documents. Financial records showing payments to school board members, maintenance supervisors, communication logs, meeting notes, audio recordings discussing positioning for when I inevitably failed as a parent. Comprehensive, meticulous, damning. At 9 a.m., Nolan arrived. I showed him everything. His face went white. She planned this for years. Read the August meeting notes. He did. She asked which equipment had highest injury rates, which areas had worst fall surfaces. She was researching how to maximize accident chances. Keep reading. His expression shifted from shock to horror to cold fury. We have to take this to police, he said. Will they believe it? Nothing obtained through official channels. Some is admissible: financial records, email chains, meeting logs. Enough to justify investigation. At 10 a.m., we met the lawyer. Nomi Santos listened to everything without interrupting. When we finished, she sat back. This is one of the most comprehensively documented cases of parental alienation and manipulation I've seen. Is it enough? I asked. For what purpose? To stop her, to make sure she can't do this again, to get justice. Justice is complicated. What happened was tragic. Whether your mother directly caused it or created conditions and exploited them, that distinction matters legally. Direct causation would be criminal. Creating conditions might not be. So she gets away with it. I didn't say that. Criminal case is uncertain, but civil case is strong. Parental rights interference, intentional emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy. We could file and likely win. Money isn't what I want. No, but legal judgment is. It establishes official record, protects you from future action, gives you leverage. Leverage for what? To make demands. Permanent restraining order. Complete cessation of contact. Acknowledgement of wrongdoing, whatever gives you closure. What if I want more? Then we pursue criminal investigation, but understand that's risky. District attorneys don't like circumstantial cases. If they decline prosecution, it becomes harder to pursue civil action. But if they do prosecute, then you might get actual justice. Prison time, criminal record, permanent consequences. But it's a gamble. Nolan spoke. What if we threaten prosecution to force settlement? Give her the choice? That's called extortion if handled wrong. Negotiation if handled right. We'd need to approach the DA first, gauge interest. If they're willing, that becomes leverage. We present your mother with the choice. Negotiate voluntary accountability or face charges. How long? Months, possibly years for criminal. Civil could be faster, especially if she wants to avoid publicity. Do you want my advice? Nomi asked. Yes. I think your father spent 3 years documenting this to give you options, to give you power when the time came. How you use it is your decision. Set up a meeting with the DA, I said. Show them everything. Let's see if they're interested. And if not? Plan B. But I want to try official channels first. She nodded. I'll make calls Monday. In the meantime, don't confront your mother. Don't tell her what you found. Act normally. She's expecting compliance or desperate public scene. She won't expect silence. Exactly. Uncertainty is powerful. Outside, Nolan turned to me. Are you ready? Because once we start this, there's no going back. The family breaks permanently. The family broke long ago. We've just been pretending. Kelly wants to support you. You're welcome at our place any time. Thank her for me. I spent Saturday organizing everything for the DA meeting. Timeline document, evidence index, summary of findings, backup copies stored with 3 separate people. By evening, I had a comprehensive case packet. 50 pages of documentation, supported by 3 years of investigation. My mother called. I answered, remembering Nomi's advice about acting normal. Aron, checking in. How are you doing? Fine. You haven't responded about moving home. I'm thinking about it. Pause. That's good. Take your time. She was testing me. I'll let you know soon. And that other matter? The investigation? I'm tired, Mom. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was just looking for someone to blame. Longer pause. I'm glad you're seeing reason. This has been hard on all of us. Yeah. I'll check in next week. She hung up. That was probably the last normal conversation I'd ever have with my mother. Whatever came next would change everything. Monday morning, Nomi called. The DA is interested. They want to meet Wednesday afternoon. That fast? Your father's documentation is impressive, and your mother has been on their radar before. Nothing they could prove, but enough to establish history. Wednesday afternoon, I sat in the DA's conference room. Assistant DA Cambria Morrison, 2 investigators, Nomi, and me. I walked them through everything. They listened, asked questions, made notes. When I finished, Cambria leaned back. Strong circumstantial evidence of manipulation and control. Question is whether it rises to criminal conduct. What would you need? Nomi asked. Witness testimony from school officials, phone records, security footage. We need to corroborate the timeline and demonstrate her actions directly contributed to harm. The school will protect itself, I said. They will if we subpoena records. And if we find criminal negligence, they'll cooperate quickly to minimize liability. She looked at the investigators. Preliminary assessment? Walsh spoke. Financial records showing payments to board members are concerning. If we can prove those were bribes rather than legitimate donations, that's corruption. Meeting with playground supervisor 1 week before, suspicious timing. Phone call at 2:17 before emergency services. If we can establish protocol was deliberately violated at her request, that's conspiracy. How long to investigate? 2 to 3 weeks for preliminary findings. Then we decide whether to present to grand jury. Cambria stood. Mr. Hale, understand what you're starting. If we investigate and find evidence, we will prosecute. Your mother could face serious charges, conspiracy, fraud, and other severe offenses. Are you prepared? Yes. And if we find insufficient evidence, I'll pursue civil action. But yes, I'll accept your determination. All right. We'll move forward. Don't discuss this with your mother or witnesses. Let us control the investigation. The next 2 weeks were surreal. I went to work, analyzed data, attended meetings. My mother called twice. Short conversations, checking my state of mind. I kept responses neutral. Nolan texted updates. Investigators talked to Dad. He's cooperating fully. They subpoenaed school records. Keller looks worried. Mom called Kelly asking about you. She told Mom nothing. On day 12, Nomi called. They found something. Meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Next afternoon, back in the conference room. Cambria looked grim. We've completed preliminary investigation. Here's what we found. She laid out documents. The payment to playground maintenance was processed through your mother's shell accounts. The maintenance supervisor admits she pressured him to delay repairs on specific equipment. That equipment, the climbing structure your son fell from, had a documented safety concern about fall surface degradation scheduled for repair 2 weeks before the incident. I stared at the documents. The supervisor says your mother told him to postpone repair until after school inspection cycle, which would have been 3 weeks after the incident. He complied because she framed it as budget priority and because her donation funded other projects. Walsh took over. Phone records confirm she called Principal Keller at 2:17 p.m. That call lasted 47 seconds. We interviewed Keller. Initially claimed he didn't remember. When we showed him records, he admitted she called about a student safety matter, but claimed he didn't know which student. That's a lie, I said. Yes. His records show he called your mother at 2:12 p.m., 5 minutes before. She didn't call asking about your son. He called telling her about your son. The room felt cold. Cambry continued. We interviewed the nurse. She confirmed she radioed at 2:16 p.m., expected immediate emergency call per protocol. When we asked about the delay, she assumed they'd called, but later learned they hadn't until 2:19. Found it strange, but didn't question it because the situation was chaotic. So Keller waited 3 minutes? Yes, and during those minutes, he called your mother first. We believe he was following her instructions. That's conspiracy. It is, but we can't prove she knew the accident would happen that specific day. We can prove she created conditions where accidents were more likely. We can prove she established communication protocols. We can prove Keller violated procedures at her direction, but not that she knew your son would fall that specific date. Does that matter? For the most extreme charges, no. For conspiracy, fraud, and reckless endangerment, yes. We have enough for those. Walsh added, Keller is cooperating. He's willing to testify that your mother pressured him to alter policies to give her priority notification for your son specifically. He admits he knew it violated protocols but felt trapped because of her school board influence. What about board members she paid? 3 of 5 received donations through her shell companies in the 6 months before policy changes. Not illegal if disclosed, but none disclosed it. That's fraud. Cambria stood. Our recommendation: we present to grand jury on charges of conspiracy to violate emergency protocols, fraud in school board dealings, reckless endangerment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. If they indict, we proceed to trial. Chances they indict? With this evidence, 90% or better. Nomi spoke. What kind of sentence? Conspiracy and fraud together could be 5 to 10 years. Reckless endangerment adds more. She's looking at significant time if convicted. What happens now? Grand jury presentation next week. If they indict, we issue arrest warrant. She'll be arraigned, bail hearing, then trial prep. I sat processing. My mother was going to be arrested, tried, possibly imprisoned. Mr. Hale, Cambria said, are you certain you want to proceed? I thought about my son's smile, his gap-toothed grin, the way he'd looked at me with absolute trust. Yes, I'm certain. The grand jury indicted on all charges. The arrest warrant was issued Friday morning. Nomi called me. It's happening today. They're picking her up at her office. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be. The media will be all over this once it's public. Wealthy woman arrested for conspiracy in grandson's passing. It's going to be a story. I understand. Stay low. Don't talk to reporters. Refer everything to me. At 3 p.m., Nolan called. It's all over the news. Mom's been arrested. Her lawyer is already talking about filing harassment charges against the DA. This is going to get ugly. I know. Are you okay? No, but it's the right thing. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment watching the news coverage. My mother's face on screen, being led into the courthouse in handcuffs. Her lawyer making statements about overzealous prosecution and grief-driven false accusations. But the charges were listed: conspiracy, fraud, or reckless endangerment. My phone rang constantly. Reporters who'd somehow gotten my number, former colleagues, distant relatives. I didn't answer any of them. At 8 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I looked through the peephole. My father stood in the hallway. I opened the door. Hi, son. Dad. We stood there awkwardly. We hadn't spoken in person in 5 years. Can I come in? I stepped aside. He entered, looking around the small apartment. I saw the news, he said. I wanted to make sure you were okay. I'm not okay, but I'm surviving. The USB drive. You found it. I did. Thank you. He nodded. I'm sorry it took something like this to bring us back together. Me too. We sat in the living room. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. Your mother called me from jail, he said. What did she say? That I'd destroyed the family, that I'd turned her own son against her, that I'd pay for this. Sounds like her. She doesn't understand yet that she did this to herself. She probably never will. Do you think she'll be convicted? With the evidence we have? Yes. The DA wouldn't have arrested her if they weren't confident. We sat in silence for a while. I'm proud of you, he said finally, for standing up to her, for not backing down. I know how hard that is. You did it first. Took me 23 years. You did it in 2 weeks. Only because you spent 3 years preparing the way. He smiled slightly. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. He stood. I should go, but I'm here now, not disappearing again. Whatever you need, I'm available. Thank you. After he left, I sat alone with my thoughts. The arrest had happened. The process was in motion. There was no stopping it now. My phone buzzed. Text from Ms. Rourke. I saw the news. I can't believe it's real. Thank you for not giving up. I replied. Thank you for taking the risk to tell me the truth. Another text from Nolan. Kelly and I are here if you need anything. Seriously, anything. The support felt strange. For so long, I'd been isolated, managing everything alone. Now people were reaching out. Saturday morning, Nomi called. Bail hearing is Monday. The DA is arguing she's a flight risk given her resources. They want to hold her until trial. Will they? Probably not. She has no criminal history, deep community ties. Judge will likely grant bail with conditions, but it sends a message that they're taking this seriously. Monday afternoon, the bail hearing. I didn't attend. Nomi advised against it, but she called after. Bail set at $250,000. She posted it immediately. She's out, but with GPS monitoring and travel restrictions. How did she look? Angry. Composed on the surface, but you could see the fury underneath. Her lawyer tried to get the charges dismissed. Judge denied it. Trial is set for 8 weeks from now. 8 weeks. 2 months until everything came to a conclusion. What happens now? I asked. Discovery. Both sides exchange evidence, depositions, witness interviews. We prepare. Do I need to testify? Probably. You're the victim's father. Your testimony about her pattern of control and manipulation will be powerful. The weeks that followed were a blur. Depositions, meetings with the DA, reviewing evidence. My mother's legal team filed motion after motion, trying to get charges dismissed or evidence suppressed. All denied. The media coverage intensified. Stories about wealthy suburban mother accused of manipulating school system, profiles of my father and his investigation, speculation about whether she'd actually planned her grandson's accident or just exploited it. I stopped reading the coverage. It didn't matter what people thought. What mattered was the evidence. 6 weeks in, Cambria called. Her lawyer approached us about a plea deal. What kind of deal? Plead guilty to conspiracy and fraud. Prosecution recommends 3 years, possibility of early release with good behavior. Reckless endangerment charges dropped. What do you recommend? It's not my decision. It's yours. We have a strong case, but trials are unpredictable. A plea guarantees conviction and punishment. A trial could result in acquittal if something goes wrong. What about justice? 3 years in prison is justice. Not as much as she deserves, maybe, but it's real consequences. And a felony conviction means she can never work with children or vulnerable populations again. Her career, her reputation, her influence, all destroyed. I thought about it. 3 years versus the uncertainty of trial. What does my father think? He says it's your call, but he thinks a guaranteed conviction is better than risking acquittal. What about Nolan? Same. He wants her held accountable, but he's worried about what a trial would do to you. Having to testify, relive everything, be cross-examined by her lawyers. I sat with the decision for 2 days. Finally, I called Cambry back. No deal. We go to trial. Are you sure? Yes. I want everything on public record. I want every detail of what she did exposed. A plea deal lets her control the narrative. A trial puts it all in the open. All right. Trial starts in 2 weeks. The trial began on a cold Monday morning. I sat in the courtroom watching my mother enter, flanked by her lawyers. She looked composed, professional, every inch the wrongly accused woman. Her eyes met mine briefly, cold, calculating, unrepentant. The prosecution's case took 3 days. They presented the timeline, the phone logs, the financial records. They called the parking garage attendant who confirmed she'd left her office before the accident. They called the maintenance supervisor who testified about her pressure to delay repairs. Principal Keller testified, admitting she'd pressured him to alter notification protocols. The school nurse testified about the delayed emergency call. My father testified, walking the jury through 3 years of documentation. The pattern of control, the suspicious meetings, the carefully laid groundwork. Then it was my turn. I sat in the witness box and told them everything. My childhood under her control. The custody challenge she'd filed. The way she'd positioned herself to intercept information. The conversation in the car where she'd admitted taking advantage of opportunities. Her lawyer's cross-examination was brutal. They painted me as a grieving father, desperate to blame someone. They suggested I was mentally unstable, paranoid, manipulating evidence to support a conspiracy theory. But I stayed calm, answered every question, referenced the documented evidence that supported everything I said. The defense case took 2 days. They called character witnesses who testified about my mother's generosity, her volunteer work, her love for her grandson. They brought in experts who said the playground equipment failure was an unforeseeable accident, that no amount of preparation could have prevented it. They argued that even if she'd influenced school policies and positioned herself for notification, that wasn't criminal. It was just a grandmother being protective, perhaps overprotective, but not criminal. The prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. They showed the jury the audio recordings my father had gathered. My mother's own voice discussing how to position herself for when I failed. How to create conditions that would demonstrate my unfitness. They showed the timeline of payments to school board members, the private meetings, the carefully orchestrated plan that had taken years to implement. Rebecca's closing argument was powerful. This wasn't a tragedy that happened and was then exploited. This was a tragedy that was invited, encouraged, made more likely through deliberate manipulation of safety systems and emergency protocols. Marlene Hale didn't push her grandson off that climbing structure, but she made sure the fall surface wasn't properly maintained. She didn't cause the accident, but she created the conditions where accidents were more likely. And then she positioned herself to be the hero who responded, to prove that her son couldn't protect his own child. The defense's closing painted my mother as a victim of overzealous prosecution and a family torn apart by grief. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back in, I couldn't read their faces. On the charge of conspiracy to violate emergency protocols, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of fraud in school board dealings, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of reckless endangerment, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of intentional infliction of emotional distress, how do you find? Guilty. My mother's face remained composed, but I saw her hands clench. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Nomi handled them while I slipped out a side entrance where Nolan was waiting. "It's over," he said. "Not yet. Sentencing still." But the hardest part is over. She was convicted. On everything. We drove back to his house where Kelly had dinner waiting. My father was there too. We sat together, the first family meal we'd had in years. Nobody mentioned my mother. Sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was packed. Cambria argued for the maximum, 12 years. The defense argued for minimum, 3 years. The judge took 20 minutes to deliver her decision. "Mrs. Hale, you systematically manipulated systems designed to protect children. You prioritize your need for control over your grandson's safety. While this court cannot determine whether you directly intended for that child to be harmed, it is clear that you created conditions where harm was more likely and that you positioned yourself to exploit any tragedy that occurred. She paused. This represents not just a betrayal of your family, but a betrayal of every parent who trusts that schools will protect their children and follow proper safety protocols. This court sentences you to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years if you demonstrate genuine remorse and complete court-ordered therapy. 8 years. My mother's composure finally cracked. She turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than cold calculation in her eyes. Fear. The bailiffs led her away. She walked out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and I knew I'd never see her again outside of prison. 6 months later, I stood at my son's grave. Spring had come, and the too green grass had softened to a natural shade. I came here every week now. Sometimes I talked to him, sometimes I just sat in silence. Today, I brought flowers. His favorite color, bright yellow like sunshine. "Hey, buddy," I said quietly. "A lot has happened since you've been gone." I told him about the trial, the conviction, the sentence, about reconnecting with his grandfather, about how Uncle Nolan and Aunt Kelly had become daily parts of my life. "I did it," I said. I made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. I made sure what she did was on record, that people knew the truth. The wind rustled through the trees nearby. "I miss you every day, but I'm not broken anymore." She wanted me broken, dependent, under her control. Instead, I'm stronger than I've ever been. I placed the flowers on the grave. My phone buzzed. Text from my father. "Coffee later? I'm in town." I replied, "Absolutely. 2 p.m.? Perfect." I stood, looking at the small headstone one more time. "I love you," I said. "Always." As I walked back to my car, I passed another family visiting a grave, a mother and her young daughter. The little girl looked up at me with curious eyes. I smiled at her. She smiled back. Life continued. Pain continued, but so did hope. At the cemetery gates, I paused and looked back one last time. The morning sun cast long shadows across the headstones. I'd spent years under my mother's control, believing I was weak, incapable, inadequate. She'd built that narrative carefully, reinforcing it at every opportunity. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated me, and in the end, that mistake had cost her everything. I got in my car and drove away, leaving the cemetery behind, but carrying my son's memory forward. Not as a wound that would never heal, but as a reminder of what I'd fought for. Justice, truth, freedom. I'd won.